Good day, fellow South Africans. And the good news is that right now Australia is listening. But it's not good enough to shake the mantles of the mainstream media like the ABC and the main television stations to start reporting about what's going on in South Africa. You know, this extreme persecution that the whites are facing. So I need every one of my subscribers who's in South Africa, who's got family or friends in Australia, to send them a link to the video which I've attached here. And they need to put that out on social media. We've got to start taking a stand. It's not good enough just to watch a video and say, oh, that's shocking. You've got to actually now participate and send it to your family in Australia, send it to your friends in Australia, and say, please promote what is actually happening in our country, because your Australian government does not care about the Afrikaans and the white community in South Africa. And that's got to stop. And we have got millions of South Africans living in Australia. So I want you guys to reach out to them. As I say, send them a link to this video and get them involved. Tell them to tell their members of parliament that this is crap, that they can't keep on refusing humanitarian visas to white South Africans who've faced incredible torture and persecution and disgusting crime. Absolutely abhorrent. We have to wake. You have to get them by the neck and shake the little bastards, okay? These politicians need to be shaken by the neck so they wake up out of their delirious little world. So please, simple message, send this video out to all your family and friends in Australia and tell them to please get this into the conversation in the mainstream media. And we can do this. Right now is the time, because, you know, Sky News and other channels which aren't quite mainstream, but they certainly have a huge following, are now talking about what's going on in South Africa. We need to bridge that gap and get this into Channel 9, Channel 7, Channel 10 news, and then the politicians will not be able to duck and dive. All right, guys, please remember to subscribe to be kept informed. Ring the bell for the updates, and have a great day. And here comes the video.
You describe against these farmers is absolutely extraordinary. And it seems to me much more than the violence you'd normally expect in a robbery. Why would that be?
Well, I think what's happening, Andrew, is these people are they're in remote locations. It's very difficult for them to call for help. There's no immediate help available. A robbery in the city of Johannesburg would typically be done in a flash. Out here, they have a long period by which to steal, rob, and, as seen in so many cases, torture people.
Well, the torturing is just, well, it's unbelievable, some of the examples you've given. How much danger are the white farmers in? You mentioned 2 deaths, 2 murders a week on average. Is that very much playing on the minds of the farmers there? Is it a huge average, or are we talking actually two farmers out of very many?
Oh, look, I think there's huge anxiety on the part of white farmers in South Africa. I mean, they've got 70% of the agricultural land at the moment, as I understand it. But they need to live under extreme, if you like. They need to live with guns. They have things like electric fences, but these electric fences don't necessarily help them much. They just stall those who are coming to attack. People feel it's not a matter of if, but when, which is why they protect themselves as much as possible. And they build networks among their fellow farmers, so because the police are so unreliable that they need to call for help if they are attacked to their neighbours. And the attacks are just happening with great frequency, 400 plus last year, which is like 4 times what occurred, say, 10 years ago.
And is it likely to get worse? I mean, now that the Parliament has passed the motion about repossessing land without compensation from white farmers, it's almost like giving a green light in one sense to more of the same, isn't it?
Well, this has been discussed for years in South Africa, and every time it is discussed by black leaders, it seems there's a direct correlation to the attacks. And so what we've seen this year so far is we're possibly heading to a record year. So these people have great reason to be concerned, and their families in Australia. There's 200,000 South African-born people in Australia. They're extremely worried what's going to happen. These people are in a very difficult position. The rand is low. There's been threats issued that all land occupied by white farmers is stolen land. Therefore, the people have been told, you know, don't buy these farms, and there's a record 20,000 on the market. But who would buy a farm anyway if a government has issued an edict saying they're going to take them over without compensation? So these guys are in South Africa, they're stuck there, and they're in a pretty tough spot.
Well, picking up on some of the things you alluded to there'd be low sympathy among certain people here in particular for their plight. They'd say, well, look, whites stole the land, now whites must give it back. Is that fair enough, or are these people victims sort of an inverse racism here?
I mean, you could take that view if you want. You have to remember a lot of people who are living in South Africa, white people, if they're, say, the age of 30 or even 35 or 40, they had nothing to do with apartheid whatsoever. And if their parents were a part of that time, some of them, and a great many of them, made the decision that they wanted to be part of Mandela's Rainbow Nation. Now, that hasn't worked out particularly well for them. Yeah.
Well, who are doing most of the attacks? Are they South Africans, dispossessed blacks or poor blacks, or are they also, there's a lot of illegal immigration to South Africa, people even poorer than those that are there. Any idea of how the attackers, of what sort of pattern they fit?
Look, part of it is high criminality. South Africa is one of the most violent countries in the world. However, the levels of aggravation that accompany attacks, the correlation between political statements and attacks makes the farmers feel certain there's an element of orchestration behind this. Now, that's hard to prove in a sense, but what's not hard to prove is that the politicians are not supporting the white farmers, who are the country's breadbasket. They're not speaking out against the attacks, and that makes the farmers increasingly or always vulnerable. Now,
it's an interesting question you posed in your piece and in a subsequent follow-up. Whether the white farmers can qualify as refugees and what sort of hearing they would get from Australia. As you say, some of them now have assets that are close to nothing. They don't have a future and they're under attack. The country's not for them. What would you say their status could be with Australia, and are they getting a hearing?
They're failing in their hearings. The Refugee Review Tribunal has taken the view that a white South African, even if they have been subject to attack or indeed family members have been murdered, not available for Australia's humanitarian protection. And the reason they say is because more black people are killed and attacked every day in South Africa, which is correct, but there's an element here in which they're not considering that the white South African minority is being targeted. And given Ramaphosa's recent statements, when he joined with the economic freedom fighters to pass a motion to repossess white-owned land, surely that would sort of set out a case for them getting humanitarian protection, because what else can they do? Whether it's from Australia or the UK or the US, whatever country, there is an argument.
Well, you mentioned a very interesting example, a poignant example of an elderly white farmer. Wife and children were burned to death. He's living in Queensland at the moment and, as you say, can't bear to go home. Is that the kind of person that you think, well, maybe we should be a little more flexible in terms of what sort of status we offer him to stay here permanently?
Well, in that case, it was interesting. The Refugee Tribunal said, no, we can't give you a humanitarian visa. However, a special application, or they made a special recommendation to the Immigration Affairs Minister, Peter Dutton, that he consider this case purely on, what would you call it, sympathetic grounds. For people in Australia, so many South Africans here, they're looking at their parents back home. A lot of the farmers are older. They lack the sort of skills that would allow them to come here on a skilled migration visa, and the money. I mean, to bring out a pair of parents from South Africa costs, as I understand it, about $100,000 for 10 years. It's big money, and of course sometimes there are parents on both sides of a family, which makes it even more unaffordable. What do we do with these people? I think we have to, at the very start, pressure the South African government to abandon this plan to repossess land, and we have to encourage them to treat all South Africans who are under attack as deserving police protection.
Well, you say that, and it's interesting. You've got a government taking specific measures against white South African farmers. You've got an extraordinary level of violence against them, as you say, 2 murders on average a week, 400 attacks over a year. You've got their farms being expropriated without compensation. Where are our human rights groups in the face of this?
Well, as I reported today, I put in questions to, I think, more than a dozen human rights organisations and so-called ex-human rights field, and there was just no reply. It just seems to me that this particular cohort of people, the Afrikaans, South Africans, who were responsible for apartheid, which was certainly an evil regime, they just attract no sympathy at all. Now, that was a long time ago. It was 25 years ago, or thereabouts. It must be remembered that those who have stayed have tried to be part of the new nation, but the new nation hasn't welcomed them. The human rights groups are just saying nothing about it. They say they know nothing about it. But Ramaphosa is the president of a big country. Surely they've heard about this.
I would have thought so. It seems to me they're being judged for their membership of a collective, regardless of their individual guilt or innocence. But Paul, too, I recommend that everyone read your piece. It's online now at the Daily Telegraph, Herald Sun and other News Corp papers. It's a startling insight into a problem that too many people are brushing under the carpet. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks a lot, Andrew.